My family voted to cut me off. They didn't know I controlled the $1 billion will. Last Tuesday, at precisely 3:15 p.m., my family held a vote. It took place in the grand library of the main estate, a room paneled with dark oak that always smelled of old books and my grandfather's cigar smoke. 10 hands went up, 10 perfectly manicured symbols of betrayal, and just like that, I was officially disowned. They all gathered there, the one place my grandfather taught me how to think, and decided I wasn't part of the family anymore. They thought they were just trimming a financial burden, a loose thread on their inherited tapestry. They thought they were securing a bigger slice of the pie for themselves. What they didn't know is that their tidy little vote triggered a secret clause in the family will. The will that my grandfather, in his infinite and devastating wisdom, had put me in complete control of. In their boundless greed, they didn't just disown me. They handed me the legal authority to disinherit every last one of them. For as long as I can remember, I've been the family's quiet disappointment. An anomaly. An inconvenient rounding error in their calculations of grandeur. I wasn't flashy and reckless like my brother, who treated the family's seed money like a personal demolition fund. He'd burned through millions on ventures like a subscription service for artisanal air and a high-end rideshare app that only used vintage Italian sports cars. Each failure was more spectacular than the last, and each time, the family called it vision. I wasn't a professional socialite like my cousins, who weaponized the family name to carve a path through every gala, charity ball, and exclusive resort on the planet. Their entire existence was a performance, documented on social media for an audience of strangers. They saw the family name not as a legacy, but as a lifetime VIP pass. I was the one who got a practical degree in forensic accounting. I built a modest, stable career, finding satisfaction in numbers and logic. To them, my life was a beige tapestry in a world that demanded gold leaf. I preferred a quiet night in with a complex book to a deafening night out at a club they partially owned. To them, I wasn't just boring, I was a living rebuke to their lifestyle. Unambitious. A ghost at the feast of their inherited wealth, a silent reminder that not everyone was playing their game. My only real friend, my only true ally in that gilded cage, was my grandfather. He was the architect of it all, the man who built a billion-dollar empire from the grid under his fingernails and an unbreakable will. While everyone else saw him as a walking, talking bank account, an infinite ATM for their whims, I saw the man. I saw the fatigue in his eyes, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who loved what he had, not who he was. In his last years, when his formidable strength began to fail him, they were all conspicuously absent. My brother was too busy trying to secure funding for a wellness retreat in Bali. My cousins were on a month-long cultural tour of the Mediterranean that involved more yachts than museums. My aunts and uncles were already squabbling over who would get the Aspen ski lodge versus the beachfront property in Malibu. I was the one who sat with him in the quiet of his study. I brought him his tea, read the financial news to him when his eyes grew tired, and just listened. He would tell me stories not of his triumphs in the boardroom, but of his early struggles, of sleeping in his car, of the first dollar he ever earned, of the wife he adored and lost too soon. He taught me that money was a tool, nothing more. A hammer that could be used to build or to destroy. One evening, as we looked out over the vast gardens he had cultivated, he turned to me, his gaze clear and sharp. "They're all waiting," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Waiting for me to be gone so they can tear it all apart like vultures. But loyalty," he said, tapping his finger on the arm of his wheelchair, "loyalty is the only currency that actually matters. The rest is just paper." I didn't understand the full, devastating weight of those words until after he was gone. The family put on a masterful performance of mourning for about 3 days. They wore the right black clothes, shed the appropriate number of tears for the cameras, and then, almost instantly, their attention snapped right to the will. It was like a switch was flipped. The grief vanished, replaced by a frantic, hungry energy. They were so certain of what they were owed. They had spent their entire lives spending money they never earned, and they just assumed the party would go on forever. They saw me as a loose end, a rounding error in their inheritance mathematics. They mistook my quiet nature for weakness, and my financial independence, however modest, as a personal insult. The summons came in a cold, sterile email from my aunt, a woman who hadn't personally spoken a kind word to me in 5 years but was now suddenly, suspiciously, obsessed with family unity. The subject line was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive corporate nonsense, formal family meeting regarding estate cohesion and future strategy. It was the kind of language designed to sound important while saying nothing at all. I knew it was a trap, but I also knew I had to walk into it. To not show up would have been the excuse they needed. When I walked into the library, they were all there, arranged in a semicircle of my grandfather's favorite leather chairs. They looked like a tribunal of vipers in designer clothes, a firing squad dressed by Gucci and Prada. My brother, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, all 10 of them, sitting in the very room where my grandfather taught me how to play chess, a game of strategy, foresight, and sacrifice. The irony was suffocating. My uncle, a man whose only business success was marrying my father's sister, acted as their self-appointed spokesman. He stood up, adjusted his silk tie, and began a nauseating speech about my divergent path and my lack of engagement with the family's core values. It was slimy, practiced doublespeak for, "You're not spending money foolishly enough to be one of us." My brother, smelling blood in the water, jumped in. He launched into a tirade about the time I refused to co-sign a multi-million-dollar loan for his disastrous crypto art venture. He painted my refusal not as a sound financial decision, but as a deep personal betrayal. He had the chance to support me, to support the family's growth, and he said no, he declared, his voice thick with performative outrage. Then my cousin, the social media influencer, made a snide comment about my lifestyle choices, which was a thinly veiled jab at the fact that I drove a 10-year-old sedan and lived in a modest apartment. "It's almost like he's ashamed of what this family has accomplished," she said, looking at her nails. Every word was a carefully placed brick in the wall they were building to lock me out. Each accusation was a thread in the net they were casting. Then came the vote. My aunt, with the gravity of a queen signing a death warrant, proposed a formal motion to fiscally and legally separate me from the family estate and all associated trusts. "This is for the health and cohesion of the family as a whole," she said, her voice dripping with fake solemnity. "All in favor?" 10 hands shot into the air. Not tentatively. They shot up with pride. With eagerness. It was unanimous. They stared at me, their faces a mixture of smug triumph and hungry anticipation. I think they were expecting me to break down, to scream, to plead, to offer some dramatic outburst that would validate their decision. They wanted a scene. They wanted to see me crumble, but I just sat there. I didn't say a single word. I let the silence hang in the air, growing heavier and more uncomfortable for them than it was for me. I made deliberate eye contact with every single one of them. I saw the smug, victorious look on my brother's face. I saw the cold, reptilian satisfaction in my aunt's eyes. I saw the vacant, follower's gaze in my cousin's. They weren't looking at a person, they were looking at a problem they had just solved, a variable they had eliminated from an equation. To make their trap perfect, they even recorded the vote in their official minutes, a document they had my uncle's assistant type up right then and there. They were so proud of their process, their sham formality. As I finally stood and walked toward the door, my uncle said, his voice full of finality, "It's done. You're out. The money is for the real family now." They thought my silence was defeat. They thought their victory was absolute. They were so wrong. What my entitled, short-sighted family didn't know was that their little Star Chamber performance had just sprung a billion-dollar trap my grandfather had laid for them years ago. He wasn't blind. He wasn't a fool. He had a front-row seat to their growing greed for decades. He knew exactly who they were, what they were capable of. The night after the funeral, long after the last of the fake mourners had departed, his personal attorney, a man as old and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, had handed me a thick, leather-bound folder. It wasn't the public will they all knew about, the one with its predictable bequests and allowances. This was the master document for the entire estate. This was the true will, the core of a trust that I, and only I, controlled. My grandfather had made me the sole, unchallengeable trustee, the gatekeeper of his entire legacy. He had walked me through it with his attorney months before he passed, his mind still laser-sharp. And buried deep inside that document, on page 87, was a clause he was particularly proud of, Clause 12, Section 4, the Integrity and Loyalty Clause. It was written in the most airtight, merciless legalese imaginable, a masterpiece of legal warfare. It stated, in essence, that if any group of beneficiaries took formal, documented action, such as a recorded meeting with a vote, to exclude another beneficiary for the purposes of their own financial gain, that act would be deemed a hostile breach of the trust's core principles. And the consequence was simple, they would all automatically and irrevocably forfeit every single penny they were set to inherit. Permanently. Their official minutes weren't a record of their victory, they were a signed, dated, and witnessed confession to their own financial execution. The next morning, I didn't waste time on angry texts or furious phone calls. That was their style, not mine. I made one phone call. I called the law firm my grandfather had kept on retainer for 40 years, a shark tank of the most ruthless and effective estate lawyers in the country. I calmly explained what had transpired at the family meeting. Then I forwarded them the email invitation from my aunt and the crystal-clear audio recording I had discreetly made on my phone of the entire proceeding, including the vote and my uncle's parting words. There was a long, profound silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the lead lawyer, Mr. Davies, smiling through the phone. Then he spoke, his voice completely flat and devoid of emotion. They signed their own death warrant. Your grandfather predicted this exact scenario. He called it the vulture contingency. As trustee, the power is yours. The instructions are clear. We'll handle the notifications. This wasn't a plan for revenge. It was enforcement. Cold, quiet, clinical, and legally devastating. 2 days later, the letters went out by certified mail, one addressed to each of the 10 traders. They weren't from me. They were from the law firm, printed on heavy, intimidating letterhead. I can just picture the scenes. My brother, tearing open the envelope in his ridiculously overpriced office, probably expecting a begging letter from me. My aunt, pausing her manicure, annoyed at the interruption. Instead, they got 2 pages of dense, merciless legal jargon that spelled out their doom. The letter informed them that, due to their formal vote on the specified date, Clause 12, Section 4 of the Sterling Family Trust had been triggered. It explicitly quoted their motion to separate me from the family and cited it as a hostile action for the purpose of financial consolidation. It went on to state in no uncertain terms that this action resulted in the automatic and permanent forfeiture of all current and future financial interests, stipends, and assets held within the trust. The fallout was immediate, and from what I heard, it was beautiful. My brother's corporate credit card, which was funded directly by a trust allowance, was declined in the middle of a lavish dinner with potential investors he was trying to impress. He called me, screaming a string of obscenities. I looked at his name on the screen, smiled, and let it go to voicemail. My aunt, who was living in a multi-million-dollar penthouse condominium entirely paid for and maintained by the trust, received a formal notice that her monthly allowance of $50,000 was suspended, effective immediately. The next day, she got an eviction notice. Her panicked, tearful voicemail was the next one in the queue. Then came the cousins, the uncles, a cascading waterfall of shock, disbelief, and pure, undiluted rage. The first phase was simply to freeze everything. I instructed the trust managers to stop every single payment. The stipends they all lived on, the management fees for their various properties, the insurance on their fleets of luxury cars, the tuition for my cousin's art history degree in Paris, it all just stopped. The river of gold that had fueled their entire pointless lives was dammed in a single, silent instant. The second phase was the legal wall. They scrambled, pulled their rapidly dwindling personal funds, and hired a team of lawyers to fight back. But every reputable firm they approached took one look at the trust document and told them the same thing: it was ironclad. My grandfather, the master strategist, had included a no-contest clause so vicious that if anyone dared to challenge the trustee's authority or the validity of the will, they would not only lose automatically but would also be forced to pay all of my legal fees out of their own pocket. They would literally go bankrupt trying to fight a battle they were legally guaranteed to lose. They had voted to cut me out, and in doing so, had locked themselves in a prison of their own making, forever. The weeks that followed were a symphony of consequence, each note composed by their own greed. My brother's visionary startup, deprived of its endless cash infusions, collapsed in less than a month. He had to file for personal bankruptcy and, last I heard, was working as a cashier. My aunt was served an eviction notice and was forced to move in with a friend, a humiliating fall from grace that played out in front of the very social circle she lived to impress. One of my cousins had her custom pink Range Rover repossessed from the valet line while she was having lunch with her friends. The public humiliation was apparently exquisite. The family that had been so flawlessly united in their greed started turning on each other with feral intensity. They began filing bitter lawsuits against one another over the paltry personal money they had left, accusing each other of hiding assets. The alliance they built to get rid of me dissolved into a chaotic, pathetic brawl for scraps. They tried everything to get back in. First came the threats, then the hysterical apologies. They even sent a mutual family friend, a person I once respected, to try and plead their case, talking about forgiveness and second chances. It was too late. My grandfather hadn't put a clause in the will for forgiveness, because he knew their apologies would be worthless. Their sorrow wasn't for their betrayal, it was for the money they had lost. And me? I was finally, truly free. The billion-dollar trust was never about the money itself. It was a tool my grandfather left me, a responsibility. And I started using it the way he would have wanted. I dissolved the web of shell corporations they used for their vanity projects and established a massive charitable foundation in my grandfather's name, funding education and healthcare initiatives in underserved communities. I had the foundation's researchers track down a distant cousin who the family had brutally cut off decades ago for marrying someone they didn't approve of, a carpenter. I found her living a happy, humble life. I called her, introduced myself, and told her I was setting up a fully funded college education trust for her children and grandchildren, in my grandfather's name. The tears in her voice were real. I sold off the gaudy vacation homes, the private jet, the yacht with the ridiculous name. I liquidated the portfolio of vanity assets they were so proud of. I was cleansing the empire of their greed, pressure washing away the filth of their entitlement to find the solid foundation my grandfather had built. The funny thing is, they were right about one thing. I am different from them. They see value in assets, status, and what they can take from people. I see value in loyalty, integrity, and building something that lasts. They voted me out of their family, and it was the best gift they could have ever given me. They set me free and handed me all the power on their way out the door. My life is quiet now, but it's a good kind of quiet. A peaceful quiet. The endless, manufactured drama is gone, and in its place, I have a purpose. I oversee the foundation, ensuring my grandfather's true legacy, his belief in hard work and opportunity, endures. I've learned that real wealth isn't about having $1 billion in a trust fund. It's about having the self-respect to walk away from people who don't value you for who you are. It's about being the one in control of your own story, your own life. If you have a story about finding your own justice or walking away from toxic people who only valued what you could give them, I would be honored to read it in the comments below. Your stories matter. They are a testament to strength and integrity. And if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like this video, share and subscribe for more. Tell us where you are watching from and what time it is in your location.